I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. You know, it was about a year ago now that Portlanders voted to overhaul the city's form of government. First time in more than 100 years. Big deal. For voters, it was a fairly easy process. Choose yes or no. For city officials, though, it's been a massive undertaking. And a year later, they still have a long ways to go and a lot of cost to budget. But there is some movement now, and that's our big story tonight. For Portland, it's going to be historic, probably fascinating whether you live here or not. Seeing this whole change is just going to be incredible. Now, about a year from now, if you do live in the city, you're going to vote for 3 candidates who you want to represent your district in Portland. Yeah, your district. The city's been divided into 4 districts total. So you are also going to pick a new mayor. Portland's current mayor, Ted Wheeler, is not running again. The entire group will take office on January 1st of 2025. Also, the date of the new form of government officially launching. But a lot of behind-the-scenes bits are still being cemented well ahead of then. Yesterday, the current city council approved one of the biggest pieces, how the government departments are actually going to be arranged. It took them nearly 5 hours and a whole lot of arguing. Let's take a look at what's already been decided now. The city will be split into 4 new districts. We've covered that. If you need to know which one you're in, go to portlandmaps.com. Salaries have been decided for the new city councilors. There will be 12 of them now, and they'll each make about $133,000 a year. No one can officially file to run for office until June, but candidates have started lining up and making their announcements and raising money. Once those candidates take office in 2025, they'll spend their time on setting policies for the city and representing the voters in their district. They will not be in charge of running the city's bureaus as the current commissioners do now. A new city administrator instead will do that job with deputy administrators below that person. Let's take a look at how that's going to work. There will be 6 city departments instead of bureaus. Budget and finance will handle money, city operations, things like human resources, 311 and city facilities. Community and economic development will be in charge of housing, permitting, and Prosper Portland. Public safety will handle police, fire, emergency management, and there will also be an office called Vibrant Communities. They'll handle the arts, natural areas, parks, and the children's levy. And Public Works will take care of water, transportation, and environmental services. Each of these, they're calling them public service areas, will have a deputy city administrator in charge of them, and then that person will report to the city administrator, who will be appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the city council. But wait, there's more. Under the city administrator will be an assistant city administrator. That person will oversee the city's communications, community and civic life, council operations, and a new office called Portland Solutions that will handle homeless services. They will also be in charge of an equity officer and the Office of Equity and Human Rights and a sustainability officer. The mayor will also be in charge of the police chief, the city attorney, and their own chief of staff. The mayor will have a staff of 5 to help out with whatever they need, and each city councilor will have a staff of 2. Now, if you're thinking, whoa, that seems like a lot. Won't that be expensive? The answer is, yeah. It will be. In fact, the estimate for that transition to the new form of government it's really a skyrocket. Millions more than voters were told last fall. New estimates show it's going to cost more than $23 million a year to run the new government. That's not the transition cost. That's the running the new government for that whole new year. Right now, the current government costs just over $10 million a year to run.
I do have serious concerns about the cost of this new form of government. The voters approved a ceiling of $8.7 million to implement this new form of government. Today's proposal moves that ceiling to $13 million, resulting in a total investment of $23.9 million. This amendment makes it clear that there is still work to be done as we enter the budgeting season, and edits will need to be made.
Okay, Dan Ryan's amendment was mostly a symbolic gesture. He said he wanted to get on the record, though, that he's concerned about the cost estimates and wants to keep fiscal discipline at the forefront as council goes into the budget season. Several people who showed up to give public testimony said, yeah, like Walter, who told commissioners the whole thing's way too complex.
An additional $13 million plus renovation of City Hall plus voting system implementation will be a complete surprise to voters who approved the ballot measure.
He's not wrong. Commissioner Rene Gonzalez agreed, and councilors brought the city's budget office into the discussion to try and explain the whole thing.
Yeah. Voters were told something.
Well, the voters were given a document that had, if you go back and review it, had numerous points where it said these are estimates. And they talked about all the risk of the estimates because it was done very quickly. And now we're in a situation where we have things like inflation and things that are happening that are just frankly going to increase the cost of what we told to the voters.
Tim, I understand that to a point, right? But the low end of the estimate was 900,000, and we're talking 23 million, right? And 13 million of which is new. This isn't a small.
Well, we don't start with the 900,000. We gave them a range. I wasn't here at the time.
No, the ceiling.
We gave them a fairly large range on the costs.
The ceiling was 18.7.
Right. So I understand what you're saying. We will need to explain. We will need to explain the types of expenditure increases that occurred based upon that original estimate.
Yes, I'd say that's right. If you want that explanation, well, you're going to have to hold on and wait until the city goes through its next budgeting process. And they say the city councilors will have the option then to create different scenarios and decide which ones to actually fund. Now, keep in mind, the city's total budget is about $7 billion. In the end, the city council did approve the new organizational structure with a 4-to-1 vote. The lone dissenter, Mayor Ted Wheeler, who was upset about all the last-minute amendments. As always, we want to hear from you. What do you think about all this? Send us an email, will you? Let us hear from you. The address is thestory@kgw.com. You can also give us a call and leave a voicemail. The number is 503-226-5090. I really do look forward to hearing from you. By now, you've likely seen that your PGE bill is going to be going up big time in a couple of months in January of 2024. The number being thrown around on air and online now is about a 17% increase in your power bill. That is, let's say, a lot. Here's what that looks like for the average residential customer. Your bill right now is around $130 a month, according to PGE. After the rate hike, a jump of $22, bringing that monthly bill to over $150. For those of you with commercial or industrial PGE bills, you're not off the hook either. Your bill will go up 16%. That's for commercial customers, 11% for industrial. The utility did not give us averages for those types of customers, mostly due to the fact that monthly bills are all over the board with that area. But yeah, you're going to be paying more. But there's always more to the story, as we like to say here at The Story. And in this case, it's not really good news either. Those rate increases are what's been approved by the Oregon Public Utility Commission so far. There's also a chance those numbers could go even higher by January 1st. We're going to get to the how these rate increases happen in a moment. But first, we went to PGE to ask why.
So some of the drivers of this rate case are fuel costs. It's become increasingly more expensive to acquire the fuel that we need to run our generation. And so that actually accounts for over half of that 17%. And so the fuel costs, but then also there's capital investments that we've been making over the past year or so to help us deliver that safe, reliable power that our customers rely on us for. And so some of those investments that we've made, they help to foster greater safety and resiliency during wildfire seasons. It also helps us be resilient and respond to heat waves or the harsh winters that we've seen over the last few years.
Okay. We're also told some of those investments regarding wildfire season include putting in more than 100 miles of power lines underground, installing fire-resistant power poles, and the remote monitoring systems. So how could that 17% rate hike get worse before January arrives? Well, the Oregon Public Utilities Commission, the regulatory board that decides if and how much utilities can raise or lower rates, still has a few things to rule on when it comes to PGE's request. We heard from the general counsel for the Oregon Citizens Utility Board today. They advocate for consumers and are at the table, so to speak, when the State Utility Commission is deciding on these things.
Well, these are called single issue rate making mechanisms. And so PGE currently has a number of single issue rate making mechanisms that are still outstanding before the Oregon PUC. Some of those are related to energy efficiency investments or demand response investments. And those are typically taken up by the commission before the end of the year, and the rates from those proceedings will become effective also on January 1st, which is the rate effective date of this rate case. So we're anticipating at least some upward movement in the total 17% increase that we're currently estimating at this time.
That's nice. While PGE tells us that there are no clean energy projects included in the 17% rate hike, the Citizens Utility Board says these kinds of increases are putting us on a path toward a greener future.
The utilities, PGE, and the other electric utilities that operate in Oregon are making investments to decarbonize their system pursuant to Oregon legislative mandates, such as the Renewable Portfolio Standard and our 100% clean emissions law that was passed in 2021. So there's going to be costs associated with transitioning to a decarbonized system. And at CUB, we view our role to make sure that that transition is done in a way that minimizes costs to customers. We understand that this is a big increase that customers are facing, but we are anticipating, greenhouse gas emitting resources like gas plants will be rolling off the utility system in future years, making room for more renewable investments that don't have any fuel cost. And so while this is a big lumpy rate increase for customers to absorb at this time, we're hoping in the future that we'll get to a level that's more sustainable as our grid continues to transition.
So while those companies slowly transition to green infrastructure, you can expect to send them some more of your green. Tomorrow on The Story, we'll tell you what PGE is proposing when it comes to helping low-income families afford the new hike in power bills. And not all utility costs are going up, by the way. This winter, Northwest Natural Gas is actually lowering their rates, which is certainly welcome news for customers. But, don't get used to it because a hike is likely on the way next year. We'll break down the reasons why again. Details tomorrow, right here on The Story. Up next after the break, on Wednesday's show, we brought you a big investigation into forced treatment for drug and alcohol use in the state of Washington. There's a law on the books there that allows it, but not here in Oregon. We'll share your thoughts on the idea of passing a similar law like that here. And later, we've talked a lot about Governor Kotek's downtown Portland task force, and for the first time, we're hearing some proposals out of the group meant to revive the Rose City. What's being considered when The Story returns? Now let's get to some of your thoughts on our big story from last night from investigative reporter Evan Watson. It was all about a law in the state of Washington called Ricky's Law, which allows for forced treatment for drug and alcohol use if a person meets strict criteria. A mental health professional decides if someone is a danger to themselves or to others' property, or gravely disabled due to a drug or alcohol problem. If so, that person is detained and taken to a secure withdrawal facility for up to 17 days. Now, the state of Oregon does not have a law that allows that. The only forced treatment option in Oregon is due to mental health issues. And Evan explored the high bar for that civil commitment in his previous series called Uncommitted. But for drugs and alcohol here, someone could be held briefly, but unless they agree to treatment, they're released. We got a number of emails and voicemails after Evan's story aired, but one of them really did stand out. This one's a little longer than what we usually play for you, but it really offers a poignant example of how something like Ricky's Law could potentially save lives here in Oregon.
This was a hard call to make, kind of, because my daughter's story models a lot of what I heard in this story, maybe even in a more severe way. She had mental illness coupled with drug addiction, and she went many years with substance abuse problems, and she subsequently succumbed to her addiction and died last year in December of 2022. She was so ill, I don't believe she could have done it on her own without at times being committed, however, very short periods of time. And then when she was in the hospital, they would release her at the most inopportune time, and she was back on the streets, many times her family not knowing where she was. And I just believe a similar law like Ricky's Law in Oregon is required.
Thanks for that painful call. Cynthia wrote into us to say, I do believe this would help and save many lives in Oregon if they could pass this law. I lost a brother to drugs, and I have a son addicted to drugs that I have no idea where his whereabouts are in Portland, but he's been in many rehab programs. Oregon needs to do something about this crisis, as it's a failed system currently, and so many people are suffering and dying for this horrible disease. And how about this one from Heather? We know that people mandated to inpatient substance abuse treatment actually have better outcomes than those who go voluntarily. The problem is beds. We don't have them. Laws do nothing if we have nowhere for people in crisis to go. That's an interesting point. And let's just pause here for a moment to address her points. When it comes to beds for addiction treatment, yes, Oregon simply does not have enough. You're absolutely right. We've been reporting on that for what feels like forever. But what about the assertion that forced treatment has better outcomes than voluntary for drug or alcohol? It's like so many other issues that we have in our communities here. It really does kind of depend on which studies you're looking at. We did some research, and if you go back in time, we found one report from the United States federal court system that was published in the summer of 1998. It looked at the role of the criminal justice system being the driver behind forced treatment. It reviewed 11 different published studies from the early 90s, and here's what it found. 5 of the studies found that forced treatment did, in fact, improve treatment outcomes. 4 found no difference between forced treatment or voluntary treatment, and 2 found that forced treatment actually made the outcomes worse. So, yeah, kind of a mixed bag there. How about this 2012 report in the Journal of Substance Abuse Treatment? That's a peer-reviewed medical journal. It found that people who are in court-ordered treatment have better completion rates compared to people who voluntarily seek treatment. And there's an explanation for that. The authors wrote, it could be reasoned that mandated offenders may begin treatment with low motivation, but are retained longer due to the threat of incarceration, which allows them to engage in treatment and provides them with the time needed to experience behavior change. Ricky's Law does not threaten jail time, but this is a study that people could point to say, you know what, forced treatment does work better than voluntary treatment. And finally, here's a study by the Recovery Research Institute, which is a nonprofit research arm of Massachusetts General Hospital. That's an affiliate of the Harvard Medical School. Their data was collected between 2005 and 2015. What did they find? They found it does not matter how someone gets treatment, forced or voluntary. They found no difference in substance use between more than 2,500 people, some who were forced into treatment, some who went voluntarily, and some who didn't go at all. So, once again, kind of depends on which study you want to believe to support your narrative. There are plenty of them out there when it comes to whether or not you should think Oregon should have a law like Ricky's Law. Some of you think it would be yet another state money pit. Others think it'd be a good idea. Howard wrote into us to say, an expensive waste of time. As soon as persons get out of treatment that they don't want, they will go right back to drugs. Drug rehab treatment is great, but drug user has to want it. Problem is, there's not enough treatment beds available for users that want treatment. That is true. If you have thoughts on forced drug and alcohol treatment in the state of Oregon, or maybe you'd like to share a personal story, our inboxes are always open for you. Email us. The address is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. Coming up next now on The Story, I've been calling for action from Governor Kotek's downtown task force, and tonight we are getting a look at some of the proposals being discussed behind closed doors. From graffiti crews to the two scariest words you'll hear in the Oregon state lexicon, sales tax. We'll explain when The Story returns. Governor Tina Kotek's Central City Task Force is trying to revitalize downtown Portland through committees and meetings, and in the end, a long list of recommendations that will be presented next month. But we've not heard much about what kind of proposals are being discussed until now. Blair Best reports.
In early August, Governor Tina Kotek formed a group aimed at creating a plan to jumpstart downtown Portland. It's called the Portland Central City Task Force.
There's a sense of urgency in this group. We are here to make progress.
She split more than 50 people into 5 committees. Monday was their last in-person meeting.
We're 6 weeks away from presenting at the Oregon Business Summit in December.
Each meeting was held behind closed doors, with the governor saying little about the ideas being discussed.
A lot of hard work still happening in the committees, but we will have a very specific set of actions to present at the Business Summit.
I'm just really excited that we're looking at ways to make downtown better.
Lisa Schroeder runs Mother's Bistro, a staple in downtown Portland. She's on the task force focused on public safety.
We've been talking a lot about the need for a sobering center,
along with a van to pick people up and bring them to that sobering center.
We're also looking at peer-to-peer support, bringing people who have experienced substance abuse out to the streets and working with people and trying to encourage them to get help.
I think we maybe need to think about who the audience is that we're trying to get back down here.
Jessie Burke runs a small hotel in the heart of Old Town. She's also on the task force, focused on cleaning up the streets. She says they've talked of assigning a crew to remove graffiti in Old Town a few times a week.
Let's train some more people, maybe at Solve, to help with this, and then you can cover a lot more ground.
Other suggestions include waiving income taxes for businesses based out of downtown and removing parking fees.
I'm just super excited to be able to waive parking fees. I hope one of the suggestions was also bring back Fairless Square. I really feel that that is a boon to the city, making it easy for people to come down.
Other long-term goals being discussed include turning empty office space into housing.
That is my greatest wish. If we can only turn office space into housing, we would see this city flourish.
A city spokesperson tells KGW that Mayor Ted Wheeler is talking with several interested downtown building owners. And on Monday, Burke suggested introducing a sales tax to help pay for these types of larger projects.
I get concerned when people say, like, it might be too hard, that I'm like, if that's not the reason we're meeting right now, I don't know why we're meeting. Like, this is supposed to be the best and brightest in the room because we're going to figure it out.
All right, so each of these committees will be meeting on their own for the next 6 weeks as they finalize their ideas before submitting them to the Oregon Business Summit in December. Now, again, these are just ideas at this point, and even once they're submitted, it's still not clear which ones will be implemented or how long that process will take. Blair Best, KGW News.
Thanks, Blair. Let's hope somehow it leads to action. That's what we're all waiting for. Hey, that's the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching. And remember, the story, our collective story, that never ends. The good stuff coming up next. I'll see you right back here tomorrow night at 6:30.